So today we're diving into a fascinating roadmap for the soul written way back in the 16th century, and it tackles a huge question. How can a flawed, imperfect human being ever hope to connect with a perfect, divine being? Let me tell you, the answer it gives is intense, it's challenging, and it's all built on this pretty radical idea of completely emptying yourself out. This quote from St. Augustine, wow, it just perfectly captures the heart of the problem, doesn't it? It's that gut feeling of the massive, almost impossible gap between who we are and who or what we're trying to reach for on a spiritual level.
Okay, so before we can even think about building a bridge, we've got to understand the canyon. Why is this chasm between us and the divine even there to begin with? What's the root cause?
And this right here, this lays it all out. On the left, you've got creatures. That's us. That's everything in the world around us. And our nature is, well, to be imperfect, temporary, finite. But then on the right, you have God, who's defined by the exact opposites: perfect, eternal, infinite. So the distance we're talking about isn't just big, it's a fundamental difference in the very nature of being. Now this is the crucial link. The text argues that love creates likeness. I mean, think about it in everyday terms, right? If you pour all your love and energy into collecting stamps, you become a stamp collector. If you chase worldly success, you start to take on those values. Well, the logic here is the same. If your soul gets attached to things that are imperfect and fleeting, it starts to look just like them. And that, in turn, makes it just as distant from the divine.
All right, so if attaching ourselves to the world is the problem, what's the fix? Well, the text lays out a path, but I gotta warn you, it's not a casual stroll in the park. It's a demanding, all-in kind of spiritual journey.
And the biggest roadblock on this path, according to the author, are our appetites. Now be careful here, because it's not just about what we'd normally call sins. An appetite, in this context, is any desire for any created thing, could be comfort, could be knowledge, even good things, that starts competing with your desire for God. And to really ground this idea, the text goes right to Scripture. This line from the Gospel of Luke is presented as the ultimate proof. It's not about finding a healthy work-life balance with your attachments, it's arguing for total renunciation. It's pretty black and white. So here it is, the core thesis of the whole thing. The only way to get to that divine union is through something called the mortification of the appetites. I know, it's a really strong phrase. It literally means putting those desires to death. It's a call for a complete and total emptying of the soul, getting rid of all those worldly desires. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds incredibly abstract and maybe a little extreme, right? So to make it really clear, the text uses these powerful stories, these allegories from the Old Testament, and they're not just bedtime stories. They're meant to be practical, symbolic lessons for anyone on this path. So our first case study is the story of the Israelites in the desert receiving manna from heaven. This whole story is used to show a really important rule. You have to be completely empty of the old stuff before you can get the new, real spiritual nourishment. And this just illustrates the point perfectly. God literally waited. The miraculous food from heaven, the manna, didn't show up until every last crumb of the earthly food they'd brought from Egypt was totally gone. The lesson is clear. God only provides that divine stuff once you've let go of your reliance on everything else. But it gets even more intense. Because even after they got the manna, some of the people still crave the food they used to have in Egypt. And according to the text, this act of mixing your desires, wanting the divine food, but also kind of missing your old junk food, was a huge offense. The idea is you have to let go of the old taste completely to really appreciate the new one. Okay, for our second story, we go from the desert floor to the top of a mountain. We're looking at Moses climbing Mount Sinai to speak with God. And this story shifts our focus from what we're fed to the actual climb itself, that active and very lonely journey toward the divine. And the rules for this meeting were super strict. Moses had to go alone. The rest of the people, they had to stay at the bottom. But look at that last rule, because this is where it gets really interesting. Even the beasts weren't allowed to so much as graze on the side of the mountain. The text interprets these beasts as our appetites, our desires. The lesson? It's not enough to leave your big attachments at the bottom. You can't even let your smallest, most casual desires tag along for the climb. So, you've given up worldly food, you've climbed the mountain, all by yourself. Where does this road actually lead? Well, these last few allegories get to the final destination, the complete transformation of your soul. To show us how this works, the text points to the story of Jacob getting ready to build an altar to God.
But before he can even lay the first stone, the people themselves have to be made ready. And he gives them this clear, 3-step purification plan.
So step 1, destroy the strange gods. Symbolically, that means get rid of all your other loves and attachments. Step 2, purify themselves. That's the active denial of those appetites we've been talking about. And finally, step 3, change their garments. This is the big one. It represents the final transformation, where you shed your old self and put on a totally new understanding, a new way of seeing everything.
And the result of doing all this is, well, it's profound. It's not just about becoming a better version of yourself. It's a complete reboot. The old self, with all its old cravings and habits, just stops existing. The soul is clothed in something entirely new.
And that brings us to what is maybe the most powerful and central metaphor in this entire work. To really drive the point home, it reminds us of the specific instructions God gave for building the altar that would hold the Ark of the Covenant. And what was the rule? It had to be empty. It had to be hollow inside.
And there you have it. The soul itself is meant to become that altar. And for it to be a worthy place for the divine to reside, it has to be made perfectly empty of everything else. That emptiness, that hollowing out of the self and all its worldly attachments, is exactly what makes room for God.
But the text doesn't end there. It gives us one final and pretty chilling warning. It brings up the story of Aaron's sons. They approached the holy altar and they offered strange fire from a source that wasn't approved. And for that, they were instantly struck down.
The spiritual lesson here is sharp and unmistakable. That strange fire represents any alien love, any affection, any desire that isn't purely and totally directed at God. So the one lesson that runs through every single one of these stories is this need for an absolute, unmixed purity of intention.
And that's where this incredible, intense spiritual map leaves us. It turns all of this theology into a really challenging, really personal question. If this whole metaphor is true, if your soul really is an altar, what are you putting on it? What's the offering you're making? It's definitely something to think about.